Well, hey, good morning, everybody. What is this, update week? Yesterday we did an update on Idaho 4. I hate saying that, but you know who I'm talking about. Today we're doing an update on Lindsay Clancy. I don't think we've talked about her in a year or so. Well, at least a year. But a lot of stuff is coming out. A lot of stuff. Let's see who's in here. Hello, Stephanie Marie. I'm trying not to sound like the chick from Romper Room. I'm going to try to use a sexy voice. Good morning, preschool granny. What are you wearing? I see Pat K made it in. Hey, Pat K. Karma's on time. True Crime Beat got a tetanus shot yesterday. Let's send some goodwill wishes to True Crime Beat since she got her tetanus shot and decided to tell everybody in chat about it. Can we all throw some prayers up for True Crime Beat? And the injuries just keep on coming. Stephanie James got a sunburn on her face yesterday or Sunday. I'm so turned around with this time change. I woke up Sunday morning thinking it was Monday. I woke up this morning thinking it was Wednesday. I about played Mike for you guys and started asking who's good on pink and all that stuff again. Sunburns do suck, but so do tetanus shots. My doctor insisted I get one. And I said, I've had one. He goes, well, that's when you cut yourself with the chainsaw. It's been over 10 years. And every time they remind me of something being a decade ago, really makes me feel old. Okay? Anybody else feel that way when they see their doctor? When they remind you of something? It's kind of like when you see how old Forrest Gump, that movie is, or Titanic or Pretty Woman, and you're sitting there going, well, shit. Let's take a minute and tell everybody good morning, hola, hi, how you doing? You know the routine. We're all friends here. Stephanie James, thank you for rubbing it in. She said Arizona doesn't have daylight savings. And it is very confusing when you go through Arizona because you don't know if you're on Pacific time or Mountain time. But everybody in Arizona knows exactly what time it is. Love it. Arizona is my jam. It is an awesome state. All right, let's get to Lindsay Clancy. When we first started talking about Lindsay, a lot of us went with the whole postpartum depression. We're like, because she tried to hurt herself too. Some people in here going, don't care, don't want to hear it. That was when we had a lot of people talking about this case. And as we know how the internet works, anytime there's a new flavor of the month, they go that way. But that's okay because we're not going to give up on the true victims in this case, which is Patrick. Absolutely, he's a victim. His children were murdered, according to the state. Cora, who was 5 years old, Dawson, who was 3, and Callan, that was 7. Now, they are looking for an insanity plea. Some people would say, well, hell yeah, she'd have to be crazy. She sent him out on some fool's errands, meaning Patrick, and while he was gone, picking up food, she gave him a very long route. Picking up food and all that stuff. She had all this premeditated. They said that when she threw herself out of the window, she missed the bushes, hence why she's still paralyzed from the waist down. So some people would say, yeah, this is totally crazy. I don't think it's going to work. I just don't think it's going to work. Let's just do a little reminder first of what we're dealing with, because when we all watched the first hearing, that first hearing was almost like a damn trial in itself. Every one of us, even me, were speechless. Here we go. Here's a recap of what we're dealing with from CBS Boston. Speaking of Boston, you would think Amy in Boston would be here. You would think Amber would be here. But they're all doing that Karen Reed stuff right now. Come on, Boston. Come see your people.
Duxbury mother accused of killing her children wiped tears from her eyes as prosecutors spelled out their case against her. She listened in a hospital bed as they described the steps she allegedly took.
Chrissy's here. Chrissy doesn't live in Boston anymore, but that's where she's from. So we have our token Bostonian in here. Is that the way to say it? Our token tea thrower. Our token Beantown girl is here.
Before strangling the children.
Now, the prosecution argues that she was lucid at the time, while her lawyer insists that she was not in her right mind. WBZ's Christina Hager's live for us in Duxbury tonight with the breaking details in the case. Christina?
David,
she strangled them with like those bands you use to exercise. I don't have any laying around here, but that's what she used. Patrick got home, of course, sees his wife on the lawn. Of course, he's a mess. He's screaming. He's yelling. He's in panic. He went inside and they could hear him screaming, "What did you do?" The state said she planned it. Now, remember, there was a huge GoFundMe, and we knew something was shaking out when he changed it to "this won't be benefiting her at all."
this was so difficult that Lindsay Clancy's attorney says she hasn't been able to even process emotion. She's on 24/7 suicide watch. He says he doesn't even know if she would be able to stay alive long enough to make it to a trial. Lindsay Clancy in her hospital bed on a Zoom link connecting her to Plymouth Court.
Is Ms. Clancy in a position that the two of you can hear me?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
The 32-year-old Duxbury mom's attorney says she's paralyzed from the waist down after she jumped out a window at her family home. 2 weeks later, there are still flowers, stuffed animals, and signs of the community's heartache.
On Friday, January 27th, 2023, using an erasable whiteboard because she was still temporarily intubated, one of the first questions that Lindsay Clancy asked was, "Do I need an attorney?"
Clancy now facing murder charges in connection with the heartbreaking episode in which she allegedly strangled her 3 children, an infant, a toddler, and a 5-year-old. The prosecutor explaining how she seemed clear of mind that day, texting her husband who was out running errands.
When he arrives home, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Patrick can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children.
Her attorney, Kevin Reddington, argued she was...
And he's no small fry as an attorney, okay? This is a very, very, very accomplished defense attorney. And of course, he's talking about what she was taking, medication. Her medication wasn't right. Now, mind you, she's a nurse. We have a lot of people that were, in here now that are nurses saying, just because she's a nurse doesn't mean she was taking things right. Okay? And yes, Stillwaters still said, didn't she tell him to go to a specific restaurant to pick up food that was far enough away? And had him stop at the CVS. I think he was getting Miralax or something like that. Which is very odd because she knew that the Miralax was not going to be needed. It's a wonder she didn't have him bring the takeout to the lawn for her to have her meal before she got in the ambulance. Good morning, Jenbug.
Was overly medicated. Treatment for mental health anxiety. Her attorney, Kevin Reddington, argued she was overly medicated. Treatment for mental health anxiety. that had her at McLean Hospital for 5 days just a couple weeks earlier.
Now, our society fails miserably in treating women with postpartum depression or even postpartum psychosis. It's Medicaid, Medicaid, Medicaid.
Prosecutors say she gave her husband this explanation over the phone yesterday.
And she said she heard a man's voice telling her to kill the kids and kill herself because it was her last chance.
Okay, do we think that happened? Or has she been studying other cases? Sometimes we wonder on this channel, do they check out other people to see if they kind of take a page out of their book? We've talked about it before. And it's one of the first comparisons was this case, Andrea Yates. And trust me, I'll circle back around. I will make this make sense.
As she lives out her days in a mental hospital.
It was a crime that horrified the nation in June of 2001, 15 years ago. Andrea Yates drowning her 5 children in the bathtub of her Houston area home. She then called 911 to report what she'd done.
You need an ambulance?
Okay, now she was hearing voices. She has what's called postpartum psychosis. Now, Ange would have to explain this to us. Ange would have to explain it. I'm not the one that can do it. However, Rusty Yates, who I still think should have been a little bit held accountable a little bit, had been warned with each pregnancy, no more babies. Because with each pregnancy, Andrea becomes more psychotic. That wasn't the case with Lindsay Clancy. But the whole she was hearing voices is sort of a page out of Andrea's book. But remember, through discovery of evidence, we know that she did not have postpartum depression. She did have generalized anxiety. That's what they called it. I don't know what that is, but she has just regular old garden variety nerves. Okay? That's kind of how they spelled it out for him in court.
Oh, I need a police officer. Yeah, send an ambulance.
Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and baby Mary, 7 years to just 6 months old. Her husband Rusty was working at the time. He returned to a scene of sheer terror.
Cops were crying. There was a lot of emotion there. They were the guys that had gone to that house and had to recover the bodies. This morning, police found...
Phil Archer of NBC station KPRC was the first reporter on the scene.
They brought Andrea out, and her clothes were still wet, and her hair was still wet from the bathtub. And they brought her out, and she looked like a zombie. There was a sort of wildness in her eyes.
Even with a long and documented history of mental illness, including suicide attempts, she was charged and convicted of capital murder. But the verdict was later overturned, and in a subsequent trial, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity. She testified she believed her children's deaths would save their souls.
I think we can all agree insanity was probably the right decision for those jurors to make. Now we circle back to Lindsay Clancy. They want an insanity. They want an insanity plea. They can plea whatever they want. They can plea that she's a panda bear. They can plea whatever they want. But is she truly insane? Because this was so planned. She even had the map up to see where he was going, how long it would take. She was calculating the time.
Andrea Yates was committed to a Texas mental hospital where she remains today, now 52 years old.
You talk to Andrea on a weekly basis?
I'd say probably about every 7 or 8 days.
How is she doing?
She is, I think, doing remarkably well. She has excellent care.
George Parnham was and still is Andrea's attorney.
There's not a day that goes by where she doesn't care for, talk about, is happy about her children's lives before June the 20th.
Okay. Another difference between the two cases. Rexy has an answer for us. By the way, Kiki, thank you for being a member for 27 months. Rexy said, I say demon in activity. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Rexy's got it figured out. I would have to say I agree with you because I can't imagine anyone planning this, doing this. I said the same thing about Leilani Simon. There's got to be something else going on there besides rugs. Another difference between Andrea and Lindsay. Andrea could have been out a long time ago. She feels so remorseful. She still has no recollection of the day when she drowned her children. She doesn't want out. She refuses. However, Lindsay is looking to get mentally well and then be out of the hospital. Those are two big differences between the cases. And I know that the Andrea Yates case is exactly what people compare Lindsay to. So we're breaking it down, my friends. We're doing a deep dive. Deep dive CLL style, the way we do it.
And grieves for her children.
Parnham says she spends her days making crafts, which are sold anonymously to benefit charity. And according to People magazine, she also spends time watching videos of her children.
The hospital where she is, there are no razor wires, there's no bars, there's no armed guards, no fences.
For the most part, it's a life of solitude. She never leaves the hospital and has few visitors. And while the case comes up for review yearly, Andrea has never sought to be released. Rusty Yates divorced Andrea 3 years after the incident. He later remarried and had another child, a son who's now 8. According to recent court documents, his second wife filed for divorce last year. In a 2015 interview with Oprah Winfrey, he spoke about his grieving and where his acceptance is now.
For some reason, when I think about them today, I think of them as being, teenagers.
Because he would be 20.
Or young adults.
Your oldest son would be 20 now.
It's really easy to get caught up in how they suffered or the fact that they're gone. And what I tried to do was say, look, I'm not going to let these events steal, that joy, the joy that we had for those 7 years.
I can name a worse situation than this, maybe with the exception of Sandy Hook. The added element here, of course, is that the children were killed by the one person that should have guaranteed their safety.
5 beautiful lives lost. 15 years later, a tragedy that still resonates. For today, Janet Shamley and NBC News.
And at one time, he was a very wealthy man because he was selling books like hotcakes about Andrea. Okay, so we know what's going on with Andrea. We know she doesn't want to get out. She doesn't feel safe on the outside. Probably smart. Some people never bought the postpartum depression, or as they said, postpartum psychosis. I had to learn a lot about this when we started covering Lindsay's case because there's a huge difference. Still Waters is ready to go. Still Waters is ready. So we go back to Lindsay.
Miserably in treating women with postpartum depression or even postpartum psychosis. It's Medicaid, Medicaid, Medicaid.
Prosecutors say she gave her husband this explanation over the phone yesterday.
And she said she heard a man's voice telling her to kill the kids and kill herself because it was her last chance.
He was also never told. The judge ruled for now Clancy can stay at the hospital where she's being treated until doctors medically discharge her to another facility. At that point, they would revisit the courts here, and there would be a decision on whether or not she needs more security. Live at the Plymouth Courthouse, Christina Hager, WBZ News.
And it gets crazier. It gets crazier because her attorney will not get off the postpartum depression. Even with multiple doctors saying she doesn't have it. She doesn't have it. Does she have anxiety? She does. But she doesn't have that. Well, Rusty spoke to the New Yorker magazine and had a lot to say. He has moved. He's no longer in Boston. He has an apartment in Midtown Manhattan. They say it's like a little bachelor pad. Has pictures of his kids around. And he is saying that there's no pictures of Lindsay around, as they say in the article, unless I read it wrong. But he says the real Lindsay was generously loving and caring. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. Not Pete, peace. Within days, the GoFundMe raised more than $1 million. That's always been kind of a sore spot for people, but that's what happens. But he says she was not a monster at all. Wonderful wife, wonderful mother. Sorry, Patrick, not Rusty. I had Rusty on the brain. Rusty pisses me off. Let's see what Patrick has to say.
I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick. That is what Patrick Clancy told the New Yorker about his wife, Lindsay, who is accused of killing their 3 children. In a sit-down interview with the publication, Lindsay Clancy's husband outlines the months and the days leading up to the killings and his current feelings for his wife. Now, Patrick is saying in part about the killings, quote, "There's no house anymore. There are no kids. All that's left is me and Lindsay. If I could go back in time, I'd have called McLean, which is a psychiatric facility, and said, take her away, lock the door, keep her in there for a year if you have to." He goes on to say that Lindsay misses her kids, which I know sounds crazy to some people, but that is the reality. Now, Lindsay Clancy is currently being held in a psychiatric hospital awaiting her murder trial. So we're asking, will Patrick's statements in that article potentially help save his wife's case? Here to discuss, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Franz Borghardt, criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney Casey Early, and trial attorney, former prosecutor Randolph Rice. Good morning to you all. Randolph, let me begin with you, please. What are your thoughts on whether Patrick Clancy can help affect Lindsay Clancy's case in any way?
Well, I certainly think that he sets the stage for her mental condition prior to the murders. And I certainly think he helps her a little bit. If I'm a defense attorney in this case, I'm thinking about jury selection. And I think that's going to be very important. They're going to want to maybe put some mothers on that jury. Some people, they're going to be sympathetic. But Patrick certainly is going to play a big part in not only...
Uh-oh. Another reason why I love you guys. Look at Miss Tracy. I knew somebody'd say it. F Patrick too, she says. He is defending her while he sits in a bachelor pad in Midtown Manhattan, paid for by blood money. $1 million in blood money. Woo, Miss Tracy. Y'all agree with Miss Tracy? Because I'm leaning that way too, because when I read that article, it took me 3 or 4 tries to get through it. I couldn't believe what I was reading, especially when they're describing the scene. Yes, Tracy. My girl. OJ, get back. I want to talk to you. Your name's not Miss Tracy.
Sympathetic, but Patrick certainly is going to play a big part in not only the time that led up to the murder, but also what he believes or how he feels, because they may be sympathetic to that. Now, the flip side of that is obviously there's 3 kids dead. So the jury will have to obviously weigh that against the 3 kids being dead.
Right, most certainly, Randolph. I know all of our hearts break.
I think most people would argue, hold on, I have to sneeze. Dang, I don't know where that came from. Most people would argue that considering what the state has presented, the timeline, the text messages, all of the things that she had put together to get him out of the house. I understand at first him wanting to be there for his wife, thinking she got sick and did this, but he knows different now. So let's say old Pat finds a new chick in Midtown Manhattan, and they have a child together. Okay. He's a young dude. He can still procreate. He can still get it up, if you know what I mean. So say old Lindsay gets the insanity plea. Okay. Spends a few years getting medicated, getting all healthy. Would he let her babysit the new kids? Would he let her? I would hope not.
Thinking about this, so tragic, and certainly a big mental health component. Postpartum depression is what was apparently going on, and it was happening during the third pregnancy. Casey, your thoughts on how the mental health aspects of this case can possibly affect the legal outcome for Lindsay Clancy?
Will she get insanity or not? V. Oakley, what did he need $1 million for? He didn't have any children to take care of, maybe funeral costs, but I'm sure it's not that much. That was pretty much taken care of, because I mean, he's not a dumb man, and he probably took that $1 million and reinvested it heavily. That money's nowhere near gone. No. He's quite the venture capitalist. He knows what he's doing.
It definitely is important. Good morning, Julie. But I also believe that her mental defect or illness prior to the alleged incident is what's more important, as opposed to her mental illness after, because there's testimony and there's evidence that she was admitted into the hospital, stayed a few days, and then ultimately discharged. And I think that's where that statement comes from, that he wished that she would have stayed longer. But I would actually would love to have mothers who actually is willing to discuss postpartum depression. Oftentimes, no one is willing to talk about it. It's frowned upon because of cases like this. And I think that, it's not unusual for a husband, spouse to forgive a loved one, because that's all he has left. This will be a difficult case, but his testimony will definitely be beneficial for the defense.
Casey, thank you for that, in particular for the points on postpartum depression. You're right. It's a topic that's tough.
Now, there's another legal analyst, our friend Just Me, Susan, already picked up on it, who weighed in on this before the insanity plea was thrown on the books, okay, that they were going for that, which we could have guessed that anyway. If she gets the insanity plea, I want y'all to think about this. Now, I'm not trying to paint Patrick out to be a money grubber, grifter, monster. If she gets the insanity plea, the floodgates open for lawsuits for Patrick. He's going to be suing hospitals. He's going to be suing doctors. He's going to be suing pharmaceutical companies. Y'all see where I'm going? Do not get me wrong. This man is certainly grieving the deaths. I'll have to say deaths because we don't know the verdict yet. Can't say murder yet, of his 3 children. He definitely would rather have them alive, but I want you to think about that. If Rusty Yates can do it, he damn sure can.
To talk about for some reason, and we need to do more of that. So appreciate that. Franz, last but certainly not least, I want to ask you, how do you foresee this case playing out? It's in the court system. We know there's a large mental health component. We know we also have 3 homicides. How do you think the end result may be here?
So one of the things that we're going to see as this develops is we're going to see some dueling expert witnesses. Both sides will have experts that get to mentally evaluate her. And I think it's important to know that in most states, even if you're found not guilty by reason of some kind of insanity, albeit a temporary insanity, it's not necessarily a get out of jail free card. Many states have mechanisms in place to secure mental health treatment and safety to both the accused and to society, if in fact she's acquitted based on that. So it's not a get out of jail free card, so to speak. Now, what it may be is it may be a light at the end of the tunnel if she's acquitted based on a sanity component or issue. Does she become stabilized at some point to where she may have a chance at freedom? These are all questions, but I think first and foremost, it's going to be some dueling experts that are testifying as to postpartum, as to what she had, what she didn't have. And I think those are going to all play themselves out both in court pretrial and before a jury.
I think you're exactly right. You all made great points here. We'll continue following this heartbreaking case.
And it is heartbreaking. And it is heartbreaking. And I think we can all admit that, there's some doctors, it used to be really bad. I don't know about now, but they love to dole the pills out. See me in 6 weeks. If it doesn't work in 2. If you start feeling this, this, and this, and this, the side effects are as long as my leg. Give me a call. Good morning, Mama She. We've missed you. Okay, here's a little snippet of the article from the New Yorker. Lindsay's attorney, Kevin Reddington, laid the groundwork for an insanity defense, arguing that she suffered from severe postpartum depression and possibly postpartum psychosis. Don't think Kevin Reddington doesn't already have experts lined up to argue this, to argue the other doctors that are going to say, no, she didn't have it. It says it's a rare disorder that is estimated to affect 1 or 2 in 1,000 new mothers, usually within weeks of childbirth, in which in perhaps 4% of those cases is linked to infanticide, meaning to kill the baby. Lindsay, however, hadn't been diagnosed as having either condition. The day before the killings, in a note on her iPhone, she mentioned just a touch of postpartum anxiety. She said that she'd strangled the children during a moment of psychosis after hallucinating a voice, but according to Sprague, she never reported hallucinations until after she'd met with her defense team. Okay. In the prosecution's telling, she looked like a scheming sociopath who tired of child rearing. She carried out a triple murder, then flubbed or faked a suicide attempt. That's what they're saying. Well, it seems that this judge is really siding with the state because what do they say on the other channels? Breaking news! Breaking news! Nobody knew about this for us. Breaking news. Or the new one, bombshell. Here's the bombshell. It is. It was a damn sure big bombshell for Lindsay, because this isn't what she wanted to hear.
Case out of Massachusetts. The judge has now ruled the New Yorker must hand over all of its research on the case. That's things like texts, emails, voicemails, and recordings collected when Patrick Clancy gave an exclusive interview last year. The interview was all about Lindsay Clancy and the couple's 3 young children, who Lindsay is now accused of murdering. The case made national headlines back in January of 2023, when Patrick Clancy came home to find a devastating scene. All 3 of his children were dead, and his wife had attempted suicide. This happened in Duxbury, Massachusetts. It's a coastal city south of Boston, and it's where the Clancy family lived, home to parents Patrick and Lindsay and their 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan. Pictures show a happy family, but off camera, Lindsay was allegedly struggling with her mental health. In the months leading up to the children's deaths, Lindsay was in and out of treatment centers, shuffled between doctors. In the span of just 4 months, Lindsay was prescribed and started taking 13 different medications, all to help with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations. All of this info is coming from Patrick Clancy himself, who explained everything in a New Yorker article published last October. It's titled, "A Husband in the Aftermath of His Wife's Unfathomable Act." Patrick Clancy's wife killed their children during a postpartum mental health crisis.
Okay, some are asking, why is Patrick not furious? Why is he not pissed? Why is he siding with the defense, is how it appears to us, over the state? Does he feel somewhat responsible that he missed maybe some red flags? Does he feel like he failed his children? Does he feel like he failed Lindsay? Is it possible lawsuits that he knows that he will have entitled to pursue. That might be how they're going to pay for Kevin Reddington. Because after the state came out and said she premeditated this, Patrick got to typing on that GoFundMe. Oh, yes, he did. And he said he would not be paying for her legal defense with it. I didn't know you could fundraise on GoFundMe for legal defense. I can't remember how they worded it. Let me see. Clancy. Let me see if it's still up. It says husband's GoFundMe not being used for Lindsay Clancy's defense. Fundraiser for Duxbury's Clancy hits 1 million. Okay. That's pretty much it. It's not up anymore. All right. Just curious.
Prosecutors describe a clear-headed scheme, but Clancy says, I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick. Right from the subhead of this article, author Urin Orby lays out the prosecution side of things, that Lindsay Clancy knowingly murdered her 3 children and was sane at the time. Prosecutors charged Lindsay with 3 counts of murder, outlining what they say was premeditation leading up to these tragic events. The morning of January 24th, 2023, Lindsay took her daughter Cora to the doctor. Prosecutors argue there were no issues getting to the doctor or home and that Lindsay interacted normally with everyone there, so she was in the right mind. But in that New Yorker article, Patrick pushed back on all of this. The article reads, quote, the fact that she could bring her daughter to a medical appointment in the morning has been cited as evidence of her mental acuity. But
Okay, let's talk about this. Seems that Patrick in his article that he did with the New Yorker is arguing with what the doctors are saying and the state. The fact that she could bring her daughter to a medical appointment in the morning has been cited as evidence of her mental acuity. That's a good word. I like that word, acuity. I've never used it before. I'm going to start using that word. But Pat told me that it wasn't an ordinary checkup. Cora had a stomach ache and Lindsay had become fixated on the idea that something could be wrong with her liver. Pat had hoped that the visit to the pediatrician would bring Lindsay back to reality. A lot of people were screaming about this when we first started talking about it, saying, well, if she's acting like a goofball and she thinks her daughter has some sort of liver problem, why didn't he go too? Why?
told me it wasn't an ordinary checkup. Cora had a stomach ache, and Lindsay had become fixated on the idea that something could be wrong with her liver. Pat had hoped that a visit to the pediatrician would bring Lindsay back to reality. Later in the day, Lindsay asked Patrick to run a few errands, to pick up some medicine for Cora at CVS, and then grab some takeout that would be the family's dinner. Prosecutors point to all of this too. At 4:13 p.m., Lindsay searched the restaurant's name, and right after that, she pulled up Apple Maps to determine how long it would take to get from their home in Duxbury to the restaurant. Prosecutors say Lindsay timed out all of this to make sure that Patrick was out of the house when she killed the children. But here's how Patrick replied in that New Yorker article, quote, "I think one of the first things I asked was, did you plan this? Is that why you sent me out?" he recalled. She said, "No, it was just like a snap of the fingers." Pat asked why she looked up how long it would take him to pick up their dinner, and Lindsay explained that she'd been concerned about getting him stuck in rush hour traffic. Then I said, "Did you Google ways to kill?" And she said, "Yeah, for myself, because I was suicidal for 2 months.
Well, she's got all the right answers. When she woke up in the hospital, it really rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't say too much about it at the time, but at the time I didn't know what the state was getting ready to bomb Michelle with. I thought it was odd that when she finally came to and had, guards around her, deputies, she was handcuffed. She said, "I'm going to need a lawyer. I'm going to need a lawyer," is what she said. And I was like, yeah, you are definitely going to need a lawyer. That's when the GoFundMe started. It was supposed to be for her.
Prosecutors disagree with all of this. They say those Google searches are incriminating and show Lindsay had intent to kill her children. After picking up the dinner that evening, Patrick headed back home where he arrived to this tragic scene. Lindsay was outside. She'd cut her wrists and neck and jumped from an upstairs window attempting suicide. In the basement of the home, Patrick found all 3 kids with exercise bands still around their necks. Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead almost right away, but Callan died 3 days later. Lindsay was paralyzed from the waist down due to this fall. She was taken to a hospital that day, and she's been there ever since. An image of Lindsay in her hospital bed has now become synonymous with the case, showing her just days after the killings. According to that New Yorker article, Patrick says he spoke to Lindsay around the same time frame. The article reads, quote, "Speaking at a quick, panicked clip, Lindsay explained that she'd heard a voice commanding her to kill the children and then herself because it was her last chance. Pat told me she did not sound like my wife. He ended the call after about a minute." In a different instance, Patrick talks about this too, quote, "I think it's a lot more hurtful if she did plan it and tricked me into believing she was having a great day. Pat told me one of the last times we spoke." He went on, I don't know who to believe, but I don't think it matters, really." According to the article, Patrick says he relives that.
Okay. That's an odd thing to say. I don't know who to believe, and I don't know what it matters, really. Is he saying, I don't know what it matters at this point because my children are dead? I don't know at this point that it matters what really happened because, well, my life got turned upside down. So what does he mean? Let's listen to that again. I don't know what it really matters.
And were pronounced dead almost right away, but Callan died 3 days later. Lindsay was paralyzed from the waist down due to this fall. She was taken to a hospital that day, and she's been there ever since. An image of Lindsay in her hospital bed has now become synonymous with the case, showing her just days after the killings. According to that New Yorker article, Patrick says he spoke to Lindsay around the same time frame. The article reads, quote, "Speaking at a quick, panicked clip, Lindsay explained that she'd heard a voice commanding her to kill the children and then herself because it was her last chance. Pat told me she did not sound like my wife. He ended the call after about a minute." In a different instance, Patrick talks about this too, quote, "I think it's a lot more hurtful if she did plan it and tricked me into believing she was having a great day. Pat told me one of the last times we spoke." He went on, I don't know who to believe, but I don't think it matters, really." According to the article, Patrick says,
yeah, I'm not digging that comment. I don't know who to believe. And he said, listen, Kevin Reddington doesn't have to prove anything. He's a defense attorney. All he has to do, when they hit the tennis ball, he's got to knock it back with something. It absolutely does matter. It absolutely does matter. The state has all the burden of proof, and they're ready to go. They're ready to knock this out of the park. Get off that, OJ.
he relives that day, wondering what if he went to the basement first instead of first going to Lindsay outside. But in looking back, there really weren't any warning signs. Here's another excerpt from that article, quote, "But he said that day seemed like a really good one. I mentioned that the same is often said before suicides. A sense of peace can set in when someone in despair decides to end things. So what do? Pat asked, sounding offended, then genuinely uncertain. Somebody's having a great day. Should I call the hotline? Just after the killings, Patrick made a public statement on a GoFundMe page that has since raised more than $1 million. He wrote in part, quote, I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have.
We did a show about this when he said that. When he started updating the GoFundMe, he said, I want to ask all of you to find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring toward everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. Maybe he's just a much better person than I am.
The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. In the days following the killings, the topic of Lindsay's mental health status came to the forefront. Her defense team has highlighted all of this too, saying she was over-medicated at the time of the killings and was suffering from postpartum depression and maybe even postpartum psychosis. Meanwhile, there have been some movements in the case. Just this week, a Massachusetts judge ordered the New Yorker to hand over all the info that was collected for the article with Patrick's interview. On February 10th, a summons.
Now, this is odd. The defense is not asking for that. Because telling the jury that Patrick forgave her and all that, I don't really know that's really going to weigh with them that much. But the state wants all the notes. Is it because they plan to put Patrick on the stand and they're going to push him around a little bit? And they sent a summons to the New Yorker. We want all the notes. We want all the recordings.
This was issued for Condé Nast. That's the New Yorker's publisher. A judge ruled that they must provide all audio recordings, notes, text messages, voicemails, and emails that were used in preparation for the article. That includes all the information from Patrick Clancy's interviews, but also the interviews of 2 of his family members and friends who were featured in the article as well. All right, we've kind of gone through everything we know so far, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. And for that, we're going to bring on legal analyst and attorney Dina Sayegh-Dahl. Dina, thank you so much for coming on with us today. Let's start with the newest information we have, which is a judge recently ordered the New Yorker to turn over all of its info about this case in regards to an exclusive interview over to prosecutors in Massachusetts. What do you make of that order?
Well, there are some protections in our country regarding forcing a publication or reporter to turn over unpublished material, which it sounds like this is what they want, is unpublished material. We have things called shield laws. New York is one of the states that has shield laws, which protect the reporter, because of the freedom of the press, the constitutional rights to freedom of the press of both the reporter and the newspaper. And so in order for them to kind of overcome, let's say, that shield law, the government has to show that, one, the information they're requesting is highly relevant to the criminal proceedings, that, two, that the government has a compelling and overriding interest in the material, and that, three, and this is the kind of the key, I think, on this one, is that the information cannot be obtained by some other means, which is interesting because they're really looking for the unpublished material having to do with the interview of the husband. So really, they're going to have to show why they can't get that information from just interviewing the husband himself. He's still available. Is he no longer wanting to become a witness? I mean, are they trying to subpoena him? Is he asserting now some sort of spousal privilege? They have to show something like that, because otherwise, even if they're saying this is important and compelling and we need this information, the husband's still out there. And, here he was talking to the press pretty freely. Why isn't he just talking to the government?
Which is interesting because in that article, it specifically says Patrick Clancy is ready to testify. He's willing to testify, speak with both sides. So is that what Condé Nast, the New Yorker, is going to come back with and say, hey, he says he wants to testify. Why do you need all this info?
It's exactly what they're going to say. And it's a really strong argument because, this is part of how we have a free press, is that they can have confidential sources, unpublished material. They have their own protections. It is part of the Constitution, their own protections. And there is these overriding, there's the shield law allows for the fact that sometimes that can be pierced, let's say. But in this case, especially to your point where they say that he's willing to testify, I don't see any reason why they should have to hand over that material when you have this witness.
Well, I do, and I'm not an expert. If he testifies something different than they have on the record at the New Yorker, they can throw it back in his face because he will be sympathetic to the jury. He has lost his 3 children, his wife, I'll just say Lindsay. paralyzed, probably going to jail for the rest of her life. That's why they want it. Because they know, they're saying right here, he's ready to testify. But if he says something different than what he told the New Yorker, someone's going to throw it back in his face.
Who's willing to talk to you?
Did you think it was something in the article itself that got them thinking, okay, we actually really want all of these notes, we want the recordings, we want all of that stuff, that maybe there was some new bombshell or nugget of information that they were hoping to learn more about?
But then you do have to beg the question, why wouldn't you just ask him? You know, it could be just they're trying to be very broad. Like they know they're going to fail in court, but we're going to ask anyway. We want to, you know, not leave any stone unturned, so to speak. And so we're going to ask everybody, you know, or he's becoming a more difficult witness. And they're saying they look forward to him testifying in court publicly. But who knows? Maybe behind the scenes, they're starting to get worried about him testifying. It's one of the two. They, for some reason, either are starting to get concerned about him testifying so openly, and they thought he was.
Hell, we can do better than these experts. Just Me said, unless he's no longer cooperating. Now, they said in this interview that he's willing to testify. Willing and cooperating are two different things. Okay? They might kind of sound like the same thing, but they're not. So they might be forcing the hand of the New Yorker, saying, I want all your shit before you go and write a book. Send it over, yo.
More open, let's say, in that article, or they are just, they're reaching.
Which is fair and perhaps possible in that this came out in October of 2024. A lot of interviews were conducted before that. We're now into 2025, midway through February. So he could have changed his mind. That is very possible. I'm wondering about the other people who were mentioned in the article too. We're talking about Patrick Clancy's parents. There were also other relatives, I believe a cousin and some friends who were all interviewed, and their names are listed throughout this article. Do you think the prosecutors would hope to speak to all of those people too? I know, again, they're asking for the notes and the recordings, but wouldn't they want to speak to these people maybe on a video recording of their own to ask specific questions?
Absolutely. In order to be able to really present it as evidence, they're going to want them to come and testify, which they have subpoena power. They can, even if these relatives don't want to talk, they can go and subpoena these witnesses and get them. They're not going to have spousal privileges like that husband could potentially assert. You know, these other relatives are definitely fair game. And if anything, you know, the interview kind of did half the battle for them, right? They did some searching for witnesses, and now they have a list of them and just made the job easier for the prosecution.
And a lot of what we're talking about today is the stuff that was behind the scenes. So nothing that was published. I mean, we're talking text messages or emails that were not included in the specific interview. But as far as the interview, it's public. I mean, if you have a login, you can read the New Yorker article yourself. Anyone can. So for that specific part of it, the article, do you think prosecutors would highlight that if they aren't bringing up specific interviews with all of these people, but they could just pull directly from the article itself?
Well, that's where you start to get into hearsay, which is out of court statements. So a lot of that is probably not the article itself. There's no reason probably for that to come in as evidence, because the best evidence is that person actually testifying in court. And if they're available, which it sounds like all these people really are, you know, then they're not going to be able to get that interview in. But who knows? Like maybe if there's some sort of spousal privilege he asserts. I mean, you know, that's going to get kind of battled through the courts. But
now, one thing that's odd that I read in not the New Yorker article, but another one, I believe it's out of Boston. Let me find it. Patrick has his own attorney. Now, I'm not going to really pick that apart, as odd as I find it to be. Your children, their death certificate says homicide. Lindsay is going to trial for the big M. Of course, the state wants him to cooperate with them. But the defense does too, because he is going to stir up some kind of emotion in this jury. I mean, look at what he's lost. His home. He doesn't live in Duxbury anymore. His children, his wife. Jesse said, I wonder if they drug tested her. Oh, yeah, when they got to the hospital, oh, yeah, they did a full panel. Makes you wonder if she was truly prescribed wrong, because they would know in the hospital.
An interview is, when people are available, is not going to, pass that hearsay rule.
Something you've brought up throughout this entire interview is spousal privilege, which I actually haven't talked much about with you in the past. So I wanted to bring that up right now.
Now, if the people at the New Yorker or the people on Law and Crime listened to our show yesterday, the hearsay law came in during the Idaho 4 case that's ongoing about text messages, 911 calls, and stuff like that. Of course, they said, no, it's not hearsay. This will be part of the court record. So good luck. I don't know why the New Yorker would want to fight them on it. I don't know why Patrick would have an issue with it. I really don't. I don't understand why he needs his own attorney. Maybe something was said in that interview that wasn't so nice about Lindsay. As opposed to I didn't marry a monster. I married someone that became sick. They want it for some reason.
Patrick Clancy is a major witness for this case because he was the first one to the crime scene. He found not only his wife, but the 3 children in the basement. So he's a major witness in all of this. He's the one who called 911. Of course, prosecutors are going to want to talk to him. But what would this spousal privilege thing mean, that he wouldn't have to testify?
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. Exactly. At least to matters that she said to him. He might still be able to testify to things more contextually, let's say, about his relationship with his children, right? Or other situations like that. But we have certain kind of privileges in this country, such as the attorney-client privilege. What you say to your attorney, the attorney can't testify to that, right? There's a few exceptions, of course, if you're talking about committing future crimes or whatever. Same with a therapist, right? There's a privilege there. And so we as a society have determined that conversations between spouses should have that level of protection, that somebody shouldn't be worried about talking to their spouse and then that person's going to have to testify against them. It's a way of protecting that relationship, let's say, in a way that we protect the attorney-client or the therapist. So anything that she says to him, he can assert a spousal privilege and not testify. He can waive it, but
I want to know about this too. All I need is Jesus Coffee and True Crime. Welcome back. I've missed you. I thought that spousal privilege was not valid if children died. I thought that too. We had a case here in Oklahoma. No ifs, ands, or buts. You're testifying. We're going to subpoena you because, a child died. I have a feeling it's different in Massachusetts, but someone's going to have to educate me on that.
Can decide not to testify.
So a through line we've been talking about throughout all of this is the fact that it seems as of right now that Patrick Clancy does want to testify. And if you go through and read this article, it seems like obviously he's going through a lot of struggles. There are issues following all of this. I'm sure he's mourning. I mean, it's a devastating thing altogether, but it does seem like he's backing up Lindsay, his wife, in the fact that she may have been going through a mental health crisis or postpartum psychosis. If that's the case, I'm wondering if the prosecution, why they would want to talk to him so much, because he might help the defense a bit, given the fact that they've pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. He's going to be a complicated witness because he has said, publicly that he does support her. He said, I didn't marry a monster. Like, she was sick, which is exactly what she's claiming. So it is definitely going to cut both ways. He's going to be an important witness in terms of, laying out the facts of the case and that it did indeed happen, right? That she did indeed commit the crime. But he's going to be a sympathetic witness to the defense. I think that we have seen a lot when you have a mother killing their children, that they tend to get convicted by the jury because people see that crime as, just, a tragedy that they're not willing to let the person go, let's say. But when you have the person who should care the most, right, the father of the children, showing such compassion and a willingness to have that person have clemency, let's say, it makes it a lot more difficult for the jury to punish the mother in a way the father wouldn't. So I think he's going to be a strong witness for the defense, even if the prosecution wants him also.
That's what I was thinking. His
testimony will be huge, huge. His testimony alone. Sometimes jurors don't let all the forensics and the experts soak in because, well, hey, it took them years and 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 years in school to learn these things. But they have to mash it into people's heads who aren't exactly scientifically gifted, if you know what I mean. But human emotion is something that we all understand. He could really sway the jury. And look at all of these memberships coming in. Look at this. Tiff got one. Mallory got one. Alice.
Testimony is really going to be the most important thing in all of it, unless she were to testify, which is way down the line. We could talk about that on a future episode. I did want to talk about her defense, though. She says not guilty by reason of insanity, mental disease, or defect. This we've seen a couple of times on cases we've covered here on Law and Crime. You and I believe, have even talked about it, but it's just good for a refresher to go through. What does all of that mean for the defendant?
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like in Massachusetts, the prosecution has to prove that she did the crime. And even if she was sick or had this mental illness, she was able to appreciate right from wrong and understand her crime. And that is something that, we talk about a lot, how it's very difficult to not be able to understand what you're doing, right? And that's why it's so difficult to get an acquittal by reason of insanity, because somebody could snap or, right, have this emotional outburst or something, but that's not the same thing as not understanding what they did was wrong. And so that's a difficult defense. It looks like here in Massachusetts, the prosecution is going to have to prove that she still understood what she was doing wrong, despite the fact that she's asserting this defense.
That's something the prosecution has said pretty much since day one, that they believe this was premeditated. She was saying she knew what she was doing. So it does sound like they're going to have to bring a pretty strong argument to prove, again, that she was not insane at the time. I wanted to talk a bit more about the prosecution too, because I believe they got a bit of a win recently. A judge ruled that they were the ones who could choose a mental health expert to evaluate Lindsay Clancy. I'm sure that
this is one I've never seen before, or I've seen it and just forgot about it. I don't know. But her whole defense weighs in on, was she insane or not? Was she truly suicidal for 2 months before this happened? We know she's paralyzed from the waist down, but they have a different theory on that. If she was trying to jump into the bushes and she missed the bushes, that's why she's paralyzed. But for the state to say the prosecution can pick the mental health expert, not the defense, I found that to be pretty interesting.
The defense will bring their own experts when it comes time for trial. But recently, the judge did say, okay, you guys can pick the mental health expert, take a look at her and see what sort of diagnosis they come up with. Do you think that is a win for the prosecution?
You know, this is going to become the battle of the experts, as we've seen in many cases, whether or not it has to do with mental health or, security systems of some computer that got hacked. It's going to be a matter of which expert is better, the prosecution's expert or the defense's expert. Most likely, the defense one will be saying that she could not appreciate right from wrong, that she was that severe in her mental illness. And most likely, even though we haven't even seen this yet, the prosecution won't say the same thing. And it will come down to who's more credible, who does the jury believe. There's probably going to be some sort of overlap. I can't imagine the prosecution expert saying that she didn't have anything happening to her. And so then it might come to how crucial is that overlap? How much is that overlap? But this is often in any trial. Sometimes it does come down to these battle of the experts.
Going off all of.
Okay, well, speaking of experts, I think we're all experts in here. Matter of fact, that should be another tier for the channel, CLL experts. But someone that I do really enjoy listening to, and I think he is an expert in his own right, because he's a very smart man, Dr. Grande has weighed in on this. I couldn't really tell with his first video which way he was leaning as far as the postpartum depression. But now, mind you, he's very bland to listen to. He kind of tries to be comical, but it's kind of hard to pick up with the monotone voice. But he gives a different perspective. Let me put it that way.
But she was having difficulty with the feelings of anxiety. She met with a psychotherapist, but they didn't connect. It sounds like the therapeutic alliance never formed. There's no explanation about how they didn't connect. I think this is important. When somebody goes to see a counselor or a similar psychotherapist, the relationship ideally should form right away, the therapeutic alliance. I think that if it doesn't, it is critical to find out why. I don't think it should be something that's just swept under the rug, like, oh, they didn't connect. Okay, well, that's fine, but why didn't they connect? What happened? Was it something that the counselor did that they shouldn't have done? Was it something that the client did that they shouldn't have done? Were there other factors at play? It's really, I think,
before the HIPAA army comes after us saying, they can't use that in court because of HIPAA. They can't use it because of HIPAA. I don't think you understand HIPAA. They just can't say these things because of HIPAA. OJ, you're making things real difficult around here. We're trying to do things over here, okay? OJ, get down. Because of HIPAA. No, they're going to have all the doctor's notes. Because justice for Cora, Dawson, and Callan depends on it. Just because Patrick wants us to go away doesn't mean it's going to go away. Just because Lindsay wants the insanity defense and she wants to go to a hospital for a while doesn't mean it will. And I agree with Karma 100%. If they both want Patrick to testify for them, seems he'll be a hostile witness to one side or the other. But which one? Which one?
important to understand this. And we just hear about this kind of failure to connect in this story, and that's it. That's all there is on this. There's a lot more emphasis on what happened with the drugs I'll talk about in a moment, but really not much discussion about what happened with the counseling. I think that counseling could have had a good chance of improving Lindsay's mood based on the symptoms that she indicated, but the counselor or whatever psychotherapist identity was involved never had a chance. Eventually, Lindsay saw a clinician who prescribed her Zoloft and Ativan. So the Ativan was to help her sleep because of the insomnia side effect of the Zoloft. She was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. So this is when a person experiences anxiety on a regular basis. This doesn't include panic. Panic would be something else. Generalized anxiety disorder can be devastating, but it's usually not associated with homicide or any type of criminal behavior. At this point, Lindsay's husband was getting concerned about how the treatment was very focused on drugs. There wasn't really any counseling. It was just prescription medication. By November 2022, Lindsay didn't have much of an appetite, and she was isolated. She had postponed her return to work due to the mental health symptoms. On one occasion, she was rocking back and forth on a living room couch, terrified, and her heart was racing. She drove herself to an emergency room after going 2 nights without sleeping. She was prescribed Ambien, which is a sedative often prescribed to help people sleep. Lindsay found a new prescriber at some point. She eventually received many more drugs, including Valium, Trazodone, Klonopin, Prozac, Remeron, Lamictal, Benadryl, and Seroquel. She was taking up to 4 medications a day at this point, and she was taking them as prescribed. She was following the rules. Lindsay visited.
I'm not a prescriber or prescriber's representative, as they say on the commercials. That seems like a lot of medication. All right, let's listen to that again.
Isolated. She had postponed her return to work due to the mental health symptoms. On one occasion, she was rocking back and forth on a living room couch, terrified, and her heart was racing. She drove herself to an emergency room after going 2 nights without sleeping. She was prescribed Ambien, which is a sedative often prescribed to help people sleep. Lindsay found a new prescriber at some point. She eventually received many more drugs, including Valium, Trazodone, Klonopin, Prozac, Remeron, Lamictal, Benadryl, and Seroquel. She was taking.
Is this doctor shopping? Because when we first started talking about this cocktail of medications, I don't remember, it could have been Angel P that said some of these counteract each other. Sarah, TF, she drove herself to the doctors after not sleeping on 2 gays. No, she wasn't sleeping on gay people. She couldn't sleep for 2 days, Sarah. She didn't go to the emergency room because she'd been sleeping on gay people.
Taking up to 4 medications a day at this point, and she was taking them as prescribed. She was following the rules. Lindsay visited a hospital on December 20, 2022. At that time, the clinician found no symptoms of postpartum depression. This becomes pretty important later. The clinicians may have been hesitant to make a diagnosis because they did not know what was coming from the drugs.
I want to know this too after Sarah explains to us her sleeping on gay people. Okay. Jesus Coffee and True Crime said, why would she need Klonopin and Valium at the same time? I don't know. We'd have to have somebody higher than my pay grade, which should be easy to find, explain that.
And what was coming from the symptoms. This is one of the many difficulties which can arise from taking psychotropic medications. So the drugs can cause mood problems. The drugs can cause symptoms. So the clinicians just became confused. I think this is what could have happened. They became confused. They just didn't want to commit to a diagnosis unless they could separate the effect of the drugs from the effect of the original symptoms. This was not possible. By the end of December, Lindsay was having thoughts of wanting to die, and she felt numb about having those thoughts. She also had thoughts of harming her 3 children. Clinicians suggested if Lindsay did not have a plan and she was disturbed by the thoughts, meaning the thoughts were adverse to her will, then they were probably just thoughts. There was nothing really to worry about. This seems overly dismissive in light of what happened, but at the time, I can kind of understand what the clinicians were thinking. A lot of people come in to treatment with disturbing thoughts. Few people act on them. So every time a person mentions the thought of doing harm to themselves or someone else, a clinician can't react dramatically. They have to be logical and look at the situation. It's not helpful when clinicians start over responding to everything because clients won't share information then. Clients need to be able to talk about their thoughts freely. On New Year's Day, 2023, Lindsay went into an inpatient program. Looking around the other patients, she didn't think that she belonged there. They looked like they were much worse off than she was. She was given amitriptyline. This was her 13th medication in just 4 months. She was discharged from this inpatient facility after 5 days. On January 24, 2023, Lindsay Clancy took her daughter Cora to an appointment with a pediatrician. After this, they returned home. Lindsay played with Cora and Dawson in the snow, built a snowman, and texted photographs of the children to Patrick and her mother. Didn't seem out of the ordinary. There was nothing in that behavior that was alarming or disturbing. At 4:53 p.m., Lindsay sent a text message to Patrick, who at that time was working.
Now, before I throw a stone here, I need to know more about the laws in Massachusetts. Because I know here in Bumblefuck, Oklahoma, if you're on a controlled substance, it is well noted in your chart. Let's say somebody's on a controlled substance and it's for 30 days. They run out on day 20. It's a big You go to another doctor, it's a big How they know? I don't know. I guess it's the EMR. So who's at fault here? The doctors for having her on 14 different medications in like 3-4 months? Or did Lindsay really plan all this?
Working in the basement of their house. She asked him if he would go pick up takeout. Lindsay placed an order at 5:10 p.m. The restaurant she selected was farther away than usual. Patrick left 5 minutes later to pick up the food. Lindsay also wanted him to stop at a CVS while he was out. He arrived home from these 2 stops at 6:09 p.m. There was no sign of Lindsay or the children. Patrick called 911 at 6:11 p.m., just 2 minutes after arriving home, after seeing blood on the floor and noticing that windows were open. While on the phone with the operator, Patrick ran to the backyard and found his wife on the ground. Lindsay told him their children were in the basement. Emergency responders arrived. They found that Lindsay had attacked all 3 children by strangling them with exercise bands. Cora and Dawson were killed immediately. Cowan was mortally wounded and died 3 days later. After conducting.
Now, again, I don't know about Massachusetts. I don't know if something, what do they say, fell through the cracks. But we had an interesting story here a couple of years ago in Tulsa where a woman wasn't getting what she wanted from the doctor. Emergency room would not give her what she wanted. I think the most they would give her is trazodone. I don't know anything about these medications. She made several other appointments to see these other doctors. Appointment number 5, she came out and she was arrested for doctor shopping.
In the attack, Lindsay made her way out of a second-story window and was severely injured upon landing on the ground. She also had cuts on her neck and.
It seems cruel. People say, well, you have every right to. If that doctor's not working for you, go to another doctor. But this arrest actually saved her life because had she gotten what she wanted, she'd be in a world of hurt.
Wrists. Lindsay was transported to a hospital and treated for severe injuries to her spine. She was paralyzed from the waist down. Lindsay was charged with murder, strangulation or suffocation, and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Here are my thoughts on this case. Clearly, these killings were horrific, and Lindsay's behavior was peculiar given her history. She had no criminal record. Nobody suspected that anything like this could happen. There is no reason to believe that she would have ever offended in any way, much less this way that was particularly heinous. The state believes the killings were premeditated. In their opinion, these were murders. 4 days before the killings, Lindsay searched "Can you treat a sociopath?" and "Ways to kill." Furthermore, she sent Patrick out to make a few stops, which gave her time to carry out the killings. Lindsay's attempt to harm.
Okay, now this is where I have to put up the warning. Okay, gonna have to, or YouTube will spank my buns and not make me feel good about it. Got the warning up. Since when does a nurse have to Google how to kill? Now, let's face it, she has an arsenal of substances. She could have just fallen asleep. Not that I suggest that. No one even think about it. Get that out of your mind right now. Get it out of your mind. This is not a suggestion. But why would you need to Google how to kill when, one, you're a nurse, and two, you have cabinets full of very strong medication? Very strong.
Harm herself is considered half-hearted by the state. They believe the cuts were superficial. And as far as hitting the ground and damaging her spine, they thought that Lindsay did not understand the ground was frozen. She thought she would have a softer landing. It's hard to know if this is correct or not, but this is their point of view, that really this was a premeditated crime and Lindsay should go to prison for the rest of her.
Hey, you guys, if you look at the top, it's pinned. The link, like I said, today is open panel. A lot of you have a lot to say. Don't be shy. It's just me and OJ up here. He's kind of being a pill today. No pun intended. Grab that link and come up. Gnaw my ear off. Get down, OJ.
Her life. That's how they're viewing it. I think that Lindsay has a real chance of avoiding a conviction, especially because this happened in Massachusetts. In this state, a defendant can be found not guilty by reason of insanity if they lack the capacity to conform their conduct to the requirements of law. This is applicable even if the person understood the difference between right and wrong. So Massachusetts is a little more generous toward this insanity defense than many other states. In many jurisdictions, only the failure to understand the difference between right and wrong can be used as part of the defense. Patrick and many people who worked with Lindsay, like nurses that work with her, believe that her mental health symptoms caused her behavior. Patrick said, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." In my first video about this case, I talked about how I believed Lindsay was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. At that point, I just was not convinced. And after seeing this new information, I remain unconvinced. I believe she is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt based on the evidence presented so far. Her defense has two strategies they can employ, and it appears as though they're interested in both of these.
Okay, remember, he's a doctor. He prescribes these pills, as they said in the Murdaugh trial. Jazzy said, "Told you Mass has crazy laws." Jazzy, grab the link. Come up. I want to hear your accent. Dr. Grande, though, is saying, "I believe by what's being presented, she is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." And I would say he knows a little something about pharmaceuticals.
The first one is that Lindsay was taking too many medications. This restricted her ability to understand the difference between right and wrong. She was on 3 medications at the time of the killings, but 13 different medications in the last 8 months. The second strategy revolves around postpartum psychosis. So 50 to 80% of new mothers will experience postpartum depression. Only 0.2% of new mothers will experience postpartum psychosis. So even though postpartum depression is common, postpartum psychosis is not. However, when it does occur, when the psychosis occurs, it is extremely dangerous. A child of a mother who has postpartum psychosis.
Well, Kelly, good morning, beautiful. How are you?
Hi, honey. Should I turn my camera off? I look like crap.
You look gorgeous, but you do whatever you want to do. Here, there you go. What you want to tell me?
Okay. I'm just going to say that I went through this back in 2000.
Okay.
It's a horrible disease. Obviously, anyone who has mental health or has had it. Luckily for me, my family was against a lot of medicines, back then. Luckily for me, we did it because I wanted to die. And I had 3 boys at that time, but they were 8, 6, and 4.
Right.
So no postpartum, obviously, but I was worried about my children. I was, because of how I was. I was deathly sick. And it started with being afraid to die, like her. Anxiety. The doctor prescribed me, which it took a lot to get on this stuff because of my family being against medicine. But we did because I wanted to die. And he put me on Paxil, Remeron, and Xanax. Okay. The first time I took Xanax, I woke up happy and hungry. I lost 50 pounds. I was a heavy set girl. I lost 50 pounds in like 6 weeks. And I'm not kidding. That's how sick I was. But when he prescribed me Xanax because I could not go to sleep and I was afraid I was going to die, he told me to take 2 of them. And I was on the phone with, the trauma people. Help me, help me. I want to die. And so they helped me too, as far as getting a doctor and getting my doctor to prescribe me. The first time I was prescribed any medicine, it was Xanax. And it saved my life for that day.
You were happy. You were happy. You were hungry. Okay.
I was hungry. I woke up. My husband at the time was cooking a turkey. It wasn't Thanksgiving. And I was like, oh my God, I'm better. My sister came over because everyone was worried about me. And I was not like this. None of my family went through this bad of psychosis or whatever it was. The doctor, I finally got psychiatric help, and he prescribed me Paxil and Remeron and then Xanax. Well, you're not supposed to take Xanax every day, when you said doctor shopping, whatever. I would have never done such a thing, but there are probably people out there. I do believe that this woman didn't want to do this. They had her on antipsychotic, Seroquel, which is very dangerous if you are prescribed wrong and you're mixing Zoloft, anti-anxiety Xanax, or Ativan, Ambien. I'm sorry I'm talking so fast. I hope you can understand me. I have to go to work. I'm 57 today and I lived through it, so.
Hold on. Today's your birthday?
No, I'll be 57. God, why do I keep aging myself? I'll be 57 in April.
Okay.
I mean, I'm 57 today, or 56.
Oh, that was your birthday.
Back then, I was 32, and I had 3 boys to take care of, and their father worked. It was horrible, and nothing would make me feel better. Nothing. I couldn't look at my boys and go, at least I have them. I felt no pain. I felt nothing in my life at all. Was I afraid that I would go completely berserk and harm my kids in my own head? Yes, I was.
Because you're smart and you got help.
Exactly. I got help. Thankfully, my family was not for taking a ton of medicine and, because really you need family. You need to get out, and it's hard. You need to eat even when you don't want to eat.
Did your family stay with you? Did you have people watching you?
I did. My sister, I have 3 other sisters, but the one sister, She was with me all the time. My mom would come over. It is I would rather have cancer. I would rather have cancer than go through that again.
And what really confuses me about Lindsay is she has still, to this day, a very strong support system. Great parents, great in-laws. Patrick's right there in the home. He started working from downstairs to keep an eye on her.
I know, it's so horrible. Believe me, I was always a paranoid kid growing up, afraid of things. What do you call that? Hypochondriac. So, okay, when Susan Smith killed her kids, I was pregnant with my youngest, and I had 2 little boys. And back then, I was not going through this. But when that happened, I was like, oh my God, how could a mother do something like this? What if that happens to me, I used to, anything. Oh, someone has brain cancer, I'm going to get it. That type of stupidness, I mean, I grew out of it or whatever. It wasn't the medication. I'm still on Paxil today. I know that I could go off of it if I wanted. I'd never take Xanax. Never anymore. I mean, if I have an attack, I know that an anxiety attack, because that's what it's for. It's to use when needed, And as far as like driving and stuff, when you're on this medicine, it says be careful until you are used to your medications. Like Xanax is a controlled substance. It's like alcohol, really. It's a benzo. But it relieves, if used properly. That's the only medicine that could be abused. In all the medicines she was taking, the benzos, which is Ativan, that sleeping one, Ambien, my friend's on that, and she's been on it for years. She wakes up in the middle of the night and does things she doesn't even remember doing. She'll wake up. One time she woke up and had tons of money in her purse because she went out gambling.
Well, she's a good gambler. Okay, I'll give her that.
She had won that night. You don't win gambling, but you can.
They shouldn't. They don't put that on the side effects. It can help you gamble.
Exactly. She don't remember doing it or anything. She put on tons of weight from that medicine too, because you wake up in the middle of the night and eat. People will sleep. I mean, so who knows what your body's going to do? Who knows how it's going to react? Now, how old was her youngest?
7 months.
7 months? Yeah. Mark my words. She had, what's it called? Postpartum. I don't care what any doctor said. She was screwed up. I'm not saying she should be out on the streets, but we need help. Not me. People need help with mental illness. And we're not going to get it by putting them in jail. She's not going to learn anything in prison. I mean, she won't hurt anybody, in prison. And I know people aren't going to like this, that I'm saying it. I get it. You think I like it? No.
It seems like a lot of people are saying, I agree with you. I mean, a lot of people, no one's saying, these are really cool people here. How long have you been around, Kelly?
Yeah, I watch you all the time. I watch a lot of people. My name is My 3 Sons. I mean, I have a channel, but I rarely use it. But it is a very bad disease. I just a year ago, a friend of my sister, friend of our family, her daughter's brother and sister were murdered by their mother in Minnesota, in Anoka County. You can look it up. And she killed both of her kids and killed herself. And they were older. They weren't little, So in some cases, we don't know. I mean, but this lady wanted to kill herself too. You don't jump out of a window after
And let me ask you this. Okay.
Go ahead.
I want to know why she was Googling. Is this an effect of the medication? And this is speculation only because we're not her and we are not her care provider.
Yeah.
Why would a nurse have to Google how to end a living thing, if you know what I mean? Especially when she understood the medication in her cabinet and the interactions it could have.
Exactly. You know what? I don't understand it either, but all I know is that I Googled every single medicine I took back then because I was worried about side effects. Well, Google side effects. They're not fun to see. So I get that she was Googling on how to, she probably could not get it out of her mind that she wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like all of us,
so you're saying that it could be 100% premeditated due to her illness.
Definitely. She wanted to die. And for why she wanted to take her kids with her, we'll never understand that. No one. I mean, as a former depressed person, you know I could go off my medicine and be okay because I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, and I watch crime shows all the time. I would have never been able to do that back then. Ever. Ever, ever. You know, like the whole Susan Smith thing. I watched that on the news, which is, you know, not as often as we can watch it now. But I literally thought that it was going to happen to me. And
well, Susan was totally different. She tried to play the PPD, but there was way too much stuff. Angel P, I'm bringing you up next.
Yeah, she was a weirdo. I will say she was a weirdo. Hello.
She tried to play the PPD, but there was just too much leading up to it.
Oh, yeah. She should not get out.
What do you think is ending? And like I said, you're a very brave person. I'm glad you got through it. You sound great. You sound great. You know, how are your sons doing now?
Oh, my sons are beautiful. They're amazing, amazing boys.
Mm-hmm.
34, 32, and 30.
And you still call them boys, just like I do.
Oh, I just love
it. Thank you so much for you coming up. I want everyone to give a huge round of applause to Kelly because she's an awesome person. She is sharing her life story, and you guys are awesome because you are being so supportive of her. I mean, oh, hang on. Kelly's still backstage. She's got something else she wants to tell us. I'm so sorry, Kelly.
I'll say bye-bye. I'm going to say bye-bye. Thank you.
We love you, Kelly. We love you, Kelly.
You guys. Love everyone. Thank you.
Don't work too hard today. Hello, Ange. I know you've got a lot to say. Now, let's first talk about this cocktail of medications that Lindsay was on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, remind me what all they were besides Seroquel, Xanax. Did I hear Remeron?
Remeron, Klonopin. Now, mine came from different providers, and this all went on for, I think they said about 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, all of those medications, okay, like I have a lot of opinions on this. I just don't have all the information that I need. So please don't anybody come after me. I'm not defending the woman. I'm not saying what she did was okay.
Oh, girl,
the babies are gone. Okay. She does need to be punished for that. The question I have is, does she need to go to jail or a psychiatric long-term unit? Now, I'm going to talk about something. Xanax chills you out. Okay, so it's down in your mood, right? Remeron is an antidepressant. However, most people take it at bedtime because the number one side effect is drowsiness. So there's something else going down. Okay. Seroquel, although it is a powerful antipsychotic, when you first start taking it, it will knock you out till you get used to it. Okay. And so the only thing I did hear them say was at one point there was a Lamictal, maybe, which is a mood stabilizer. So what I've heard, basically what I'm trying to say, is that all these meds are meds that, let's say that I was feeling depressed. Okay, the Xanax might help me temporarily not feel anxious or depressed, but it's a short acting medication, rapid onset, 4 hours, it's done. Okay, Seroquel can cause horrible side effects. Not always, but it can cause weight gain. It can cause all kinds of problems. Okay, now Lamictal's a mood stabilizer. But here's what, okay, like I'm sorry I'm all over the place, but here's what I want to say. Me, myself, and I, as a psych nurse for so long and seeing so much stuff, okay, we all know how insurance companies are, and I'm not defending this woman, but like you may need to be in the hospital for 10 days, but you may only get 4 days because that's the way it is now. So if she was in the hospital and discharged before she should have been, that's not okay. When I worked in the psychiatric field trying to help
I'm going to
patients.
stop you right there because you just hit my spring in my little brain. I'm going to have to go through our shows because you were on panel and we talked about how she wanted to stay longer, but Blue Cross Blue Shield, BCBS, said no.
Right.
Okay, back to
It's a
this.
big problem for me, and that's one of my pet peeves. I've seen this many times. They will discharge people on a psychiatric unit before they're ready to go because, okay, when I worked with the psych patients, we used to have a mobile crisis unit. Somebody would be standing on the Gay Street Bridge getting ready to jump. Okay, they go in the hospital. Okay, wasn't long after that, several months go by. Somebody's on the Gate Street Bridge, you call the insurance company, it feels like they're saying, well, does she really have one leg over the rail? Is she really going to kill herself? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that in this field, okay, you usually don't get to stay in the hospital as long as you need to because of insurance. In this field, there's so many limitations and problems with access to the appropriate mental health treatment that frequently what happens is you go see somebody and they just throw medicine at you. Now, I don't care if you're talking about a medical doctor or a psychiatric doctor, they're just going to throw pills. Now, when Dr. Grande talked about therapy, I think that would have been a really good thing to do. I'm sure that somebody has been to a therapist, such as myself. You go in, you meet this person, sometimes you do have to go to a couple of different therapists before you find the one that you can sync with. Okay. You may go in there and somebody that you just don't feel, maybe they're a man and you're uncomfortable with men, so you don't want to talk about it. Maybe they're a woman and you're a man, you don't want to talk about it. Maybe you feel like that person was very aloof and wasn't listening to you well, or wasn't letting you ask questions, or just felt like they were going through the motions. So sometimes it does take a long time or several visits to find a therapist that you can jive with, that you can talk to, that you can open up to. Okay. So I myself personally don't have an opinion yet on if she had postpartum psychosis or not, because I have not seen all of her medical records. I have not, all I know is I'm hearing names of medication, things that she did, yada, yada. Okay. So this is a nurse. We know she's not a stupid woman. So we know she's intelligent, but we also know that nurses are human. So they can have issues also. But the thing that gets me about this, the thing that really gets me is, Okay, apparently her support system and all the people she knows are saying, this is so out of character for her. This is not how she is. Okay, you got that. Okay. But when you're psychotic and when you have postpartum depression, most of the time it starts after 4 weeks from birth. That baby was 7 months old. Okay. But you can't tell me she was. So that bothers me that there was a later onset. Okay. Now it can happen, but most of the time it's in the first 4 weeks after birth, you will start to see symptoms. People who are psychotic, does this match her? Is my question. People who are psychotic are out of touch with reality. I'm sure everybody's seen Law and Order where the psychotic man was roaming around the street, didn't want to take medication. They may pay poor attention to their hygiene. They may not want to bathe. They may be having auditory hallucinations, which means voices telling you what to do. They may have visual hallucinations. They may have sensory hallucinations. Like I've got bugs crawling all over me. Okay. Tactile. They may have what we call olfactory hallucinations, which is smelling weird stuff through your nose. They may be delusional, where they are convinced that something is true that is not. But I will tell you that there are patients that hear voices and they do act upon what those voices say. Now, does she appear to be someone that was disorganized in her thinking, out of touch with reality, not paying attention to her hygiene, speaking about hallucinations, delusions, isolating, acting bizarre, having a flat affect? I had one patient that wouldn't take a bath because every time she turned the water on, she saw blood coming out instead of water. So I personally can't decide if she had for me. I just don't know if she did or not. Because I think when something happens to children, we're all very infuriated by that and protective.
Absolutely. Now, as far as the hygiene, that wasn't a problem. She was still showering every day. As far as this organization, no, she was still planning meals, shopping lists, paying bills. He didn't take care of things like that. Taking the kids to appointments. So I'm just beyond confused. V. Oakley said serotonin syndrome. Can it come on like that? I've never heard of this before. And remember, we're not giving medical advice. This is only commentary about Lindsay Clancy because I know
correct
in a very heated subject.
Well, I'm just generally speaking, and I'm not defending her. I hope people understand that. What I'm trying to say is my thoughts.
This place is full of nothing but love for you. I mean,
Thank you.
Britt said, thank you, Ange, or Angel P. She said, I call her Ange. Okay. I get jealous when other people call her Ange, but you guys
That's right.
Can call her Ange.
That's right.
You can also call her Bernie girl. Okay. I call her.
Now everybody will hate me. Oh, Lord.
No.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say, as a nurse working in that field and everything I've seen and everything I know, I don't see her being not taking care of her hygiene. I don't see her being unorganized in her thinking. I don't see her being unable to take care of herself, let alone others. I don't see that. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying for me, before I can make a decision, I would have to see everything, because when something happens to kids, we all become enraged, rightfully so, and we all defend the children, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to be the person that says, absolutely not, she did not have postpartum psychosis. I don't have the information to say that because I don't have access to all of her medical records. Okay. The other thing is, if she was having symptoms in the hospital and the doctor didn't document that good, then the insurance is going to discharge her. So I don't think she was doctor shopping. I think she was desperate, trying to find somebody that would give her some type of medication that would help her with her symptoms.
Okay.
So I would be interested in any doctor she went to, how she presented, and what her symptoms were, you know. Because sometimes when you give people antipsychotics, those symptoms do disappear, but they will have a lingering, what we call negative symptoms, which would be like an inappropriate affect, like la lazy, like her her facial mannerisms and her presentation does not correlate with the subject being discussed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does the way you
Okay.
break it down. You got it.
Okay. So in my mind, all I'm saying is I'm trying to give people bits of information so we can decide if we really think she had postpartum depression. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people on a jury, in my opinion, that would basically say, well, she had to be crazy to kill her kids. Who would do that? I mean, and there's that. So I think there's a lot of information that would come out at a potential trial that would help me determine if she truly had those symptoms. Okay. Now, you got to admit, though, jumping out a window, you don't know for sure if you're going to hurt yourself or not. I doubt the woman, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what.
That's something that's very unsettling, not to interrupt you, for me, for the state. To even say something as stupid as like she was trying to do some kind of damn MacGyver move and thought she was going to be on soft ground. No, I think something's really going on.
Right. You also have to have grossly disorganized thinking or behavior to be classified as postpartum depression diagnosis. And yes, I'm also looking at my DSM as I say this, because I can't remember every little thing. But generally speaking, I mean, I had a lady that was pregnant and was already psychotic on the floor. And she would try to slam her stomach, her 7-month stomach, 7 months gestation, into the wall. I mean, she was totally out there psychotic. And she would literally thought that there was something in her stomach, but it was not a baby. And she would literally slam her stomach run and slam her stomach into the wall. She was psychotic. She was psychotic. Our concern was keeping her and the baby safe. Okay. I do question the treatment. I have known people and perhaps have experienced that myself, where you go to a therapist and you're like, he's not listening to me. So I guess I've said enough about it. But I'm not ready to say no way she faked it until I see all the records, because all those different medicines, first of all, nurses make the worst patients.
So
and
do
do doctors. That's
you ever
right.
seen a doctor outside smoking with the nurses and going in telling people to quit smoking?
That's right.
You ever
And
see from a fat doctor telling you to lose weight? Yeah, you're exactly right.
Right. So there's a lot of things that, we don't know yet. Not that I'm excusing her behavior, not that I'm saying it's okay what she did. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not defending the woman, but I'm just saying I see some things that kind of fit that, but then I see a lot of things that don't fit that diagnosis. So
Doctors not communicating with each other. When somebody comes in and they want a war chest like that, you need to get their past records. Did that happen?
Absolutely.
I don't
Absolutely. And that's another good question. Did she go to a doctor and get meds? And he said, okay, take this, that, and the other. Then she got home and she started taking them. She's like, oh my God, I'm still not better. Which, some medications take a 4 to 6 weeks period to get a therapeutic blood level. Okay. So then she might have gone to another doctor out of desperation and said, I went to this doctor and he gave me these medicines and I'm still having these symptoms and I don't know what to do. So yes, the doctors should have been communicating, but they can't communicate if she doesn't sign a release of information saying that my new doctor here can talk to my old doctor here. And I think there were a lot of gaps like that that did not occur. I'm not sure she got the appropriate treatment, but I'm not saying that I'm defending her or she's not guilty.
Mm-mm. And sometimes I can speak from experience. My best friend is a nurse, and getting her to go to the doctor is like pulling teeth. I won't say her name.
Stop talking about me.
So when you see a nurse that's actually trying to get help, right there, you know something was going on. Because I can tell you right now, Ange here on the screen, she could have a bone sticking out of her arm. She'd go to the local CVS. She'd prop that shit up real quick on her own and say, "Well, when I get time, I'll go to the doctor."
Yeah. Unfortunately, when you get older, you have to start doing what they tell you, that, as I have experienced here lately, because I'm getting old and give out. But anyway, yeah, so I hope that people understand what I'm trying to say, is that in order for her to be, having postpartum psychosis, did this start happening within 4 weeks of the birth? I mean, when the baby was 4 weeks old, did it start happening then? Because if she went to the doctor then she probably did have it and started getting medicines. But 7 months out, the youngest child is 7 months. That's a little unusual to me.
Well, see, this started before he turned 7 months because, I mean, he died at 7 months.
Okay.
This has been going on for 4 months, and she told Patrick that she had been suicidal. Okay, I'm having to write it because it's
Right.
YouTube, for 2
Right.
months before.
Right. And so, see, if she wasn't medicated appropriately, she needed to be in a structured environment where she was monitored, where her medications were given, where she had individual therapy, where she had group therapy, where she had a social worker. She needed all of that. But we all know how mental health care is in America, or any type of health care in America. It's all about the money. You got to fight for yourself. You got to fight for your people. But most people do get.
Switch my health care to OJ's veterinarian clinic. I'm telling
There you go. You'll probably get more help there, right?
Yeah, the gabapentin over there is cheaper than the shit I take for my restless leg syndrome, and you can just shoot it in your mouth.
Exactly. So people can have an acute psychotic episode, especially if they've already got symptoms going on. It could be related to medication induced. Sometimes people have medication induced psychosis. Sometimes people have a brief psychotic disorder. But again, if they do, you're going to see delusional thinking, hallucinations, disorganized speech, being very incoherent, being grossly disorganized, that kind of thing. I don't see all that happening before this happened, but I may not have all the information. So I'm just conflicted.
We don't have all the information. It won't be out till trial, but they're going to die on that hill. The state will. That they have all the doctors' reports. They want everything from the New Yorker, and they're probably going to have to bully Patrick a little bit to testify for them, because they are convinced this was a premeditated murder between the searches, sending him out, which was a horrible thing to do to him. If she was having an episode, he didn't notice any speech problems. Now the question is, and we don't know, it's just, again, a conversation. Could all of these different medications have made her hallucinate? Is that where she was hearing the noises? Or was she thinking about Andrea Yates? Because Andrea Yates is the one that said somebody was talking to her. Now, I guarantee Andrea Yates, somebody was talking to her ass, okay? Not a real person, but somebody was. I mean, that was a slim dunk, because that doctor told Rusty for years, keep your snake in your drawers.
Right.
Because he cannot have no more babies.
Exactly. So, it will be interesting to see how it all plays out and the information that we get. I can't automatically, in my professional opinion, I mean, I've worked with these people for 40 years, so I do have compassion, but I'm not saying that it's okay what she did. It's horrific. But I'm saying that I don't feel like I have enough information to say, oh, she didn't have it or she did have it. But the people around her and the physician records should indicate if she had bizarre behaviors going on, if she was disorganized, either in her speech or behavior.
Which, according to Patrick, she wasn't. She was taking care of the bills, taking the kids to the doctor. Britt Lundgren, she said, oh my gosh, I've been listening for the past 15 minutes. Psychotic is not even used in the medical field. Since when? After childbirth, it's typically considered mood changes and feelings of anxiety. I can't even. Now, honey, you don't need to scoot out like that. We can agree to disagree around here. I don't know if you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you've been through that. But since when is psychotic episodes not mentioned with medical professionals?
Yeah, that's not true in my experience and opinion. There is a psychotic disorder, not otherwise.
It's totally different than Canada. Okay, I know, and it's a very troubling case. When I first heard this, I'm like, this is Andrea Yates all over again. Get this woman some help. Oh my God, this poor man. When the information started coming out, I was like, throw her out the window again.
Right. Well, I'm sorry if I said something that made her feel like, I was defending her or anything like that. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just trying to give information that helps me determine if I believe that, because I know what symptoms they normally demonstrate before something horrible like this happens. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not saying that.
I think you put it out there perfectly, perfectly with what little information we have.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
It's going to be totally different when it goes to trial. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm always on the fence about if I'm going to cover a trial. I've already made my mind on this one. No effing way. Because there is going to be so many things that can trigger people as far as medication, the big S word, losing children. I mean, just pulling up stuff to try to do any sort of half-ass research that I do, there's always a warning sign. Warning, warning. I don't think it would be healthy.
Right. Right. And there's so many things to consider, but like if you are not psychotic and you get put on an antipsychotic medicine, you will sometimes have very bad side effects that people that are psychotic would not demonstrate. However, Theraclil can also be added to somebody's meds to help adjust their mood. But in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I would rather see somebody on a mood stabilizer than an antipsychotic unless they really needed that. But that's pretty much where I'm coming from. That's all I've got, and I didn't mean to offend anybody.
No. She lives in Canada, just like Angie Baby's from the United Kingdom. We have a very eclectic group of people here. All walks of life, different countries, different states. I mean, how many times on a show does my dumbass sit here and go, well, I don't know how they do it in Kentucky. Well, I don't know how they do it there. Because, things are different. It's just in Canada, they don't use that. Angie Baby is from the United Kingdom saying that term is used in the United Kingdom.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at my DSM, which I have a current copy of every year, which is the manual. In case people don't know, I think they do, but I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. But this is the diagnostic criteria for every mental health diagnosis that there is. And don't think there's not a lot of detailed information that has to be obtained from the patient or upon observation that you have to have before you can place somebody in any particular diagnosis. So
that there was multiple failures here, but when it comes down to the law, it comes down to culpability. Was she so out of it? And the medication's not going to matter.
Right.
We've seen it before. The medication is not going to matter. Just like if somebody gets a DUI, obviously they were drinking. If they hurt someone, hey, you were drinking, doesn't matter.
Right. No excuse. Right.
Leilani Simon was on pharmaceutical medication along with her visiting her street corner pharmacist, you know, and they said, doesn't matter. In a case like this, and with a trigger word like postpartum depression, and let's say you have 9 women on that jury, and one says, oh yeah, I felt like hammered shit after having my baby or my twins. And then Patrick gets on the stand saying, I have forgiven her. Listen, this is going to play out, and it's going to play out in a totally different way, but we're all going to remain friends. We're going to pray for those babies, and we're going to pray that the justice for them is done. Because it doesn't make sense to me that she's Googling how to heal, but she chooses exercise bands.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah. And that does look bad. I mean, you know, that's not disorganized thinking unless, you know, she was truly out of touch with reality. How do you get out of touch with reality, though, and drive your kid to a doctor's appointment? I mean, I just really feel like that whoever she went to see with the baby should have observed something if she was truly psychotic.
And I agree. And it seems like the family took all the measures that they needed to. Her parents were very involved. She had siblings. His parents were very involved. Her sisters and brothers-in-law, or I'd say sisters-in-law, were very involved. Patrick decided to not go to the office anymore and work from home. So it's how much supervision did she really need until this happened?
Right. Exactly. And, you know, sometimes when people are thinking those things, they're ashamed to tell people that too. So she could have thought things that she wasn't communicating to anybody.
Yep. It just, I mean, everything that they're laying out right now seems it was definitely a plan. Did the plan come from her depression, or did she suddenly plan it out of a moment of psychosis? We won't know till the trial. We won't know. But I will say you guys are the absolute best. I want to give a huge round of applause to Angel Pete. You know, and after unpacking this, it's a good day to remind each other about self-care.
Absolutely.
Make that appointment physical. Make that appointment to get your chompers cleaned. If you've already got those appointments on the book, hell, go get a manicure. Because we had some amazing guests today, and I loved how everybody opened up and how we share here. And at the end of the day, we're still friends. We give hugs, and we just want the right thing to happen. Because let's face it.
Exactly.
It's not our life.
Right.
I have to remind myself of that sometimes. Like, what are you getting so worked up about, Brooks?
Right.
Just me wants to know if I'm going to make any appointments today. Shut up.
There you go. The pot calling the kettle black. Two peas in a pod.
Your host, the hypocrite. Well, absolute best. So I tell you what, if I don't see you guys around today, somewhere around the YouTube streets, Discord, or Facebook, I'll be back tomorrow because we're going to go through some more crazy ass phone calls from Leilani Simon. Still running her dick licker from jail. She makes me.
Lord.
All right.
Yeah, it's sickening.
Yes, and thank you so much to the mod squad, because I know it was we didn't have very many people in here, but it was hard to get through because a lot of different opinions and stuff. But I think we all agree at the end of the day, wherever the evidence leads, we want justice for those babies.
Correct. Amen.
Amen. You guys were the absolute best. Thank you for gifting those memberships, long-term memberships. Woo! I don't know what to do with you guys. I know what to do tomorrow because we got a lot of shit talking to do about Leilani Simon. So I'm going to see you back here, 9 a.m. Central. You're the best. Love you.
Thank you, Brooks.
Love you, girl.
Bye-bye. Love you.